bloody tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down. Onto Sydney Road, and it hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Oh, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I love that intro, and I love it more and more when I have a guest from England on, one of my very favorite English people. He's the Talksport cricket editor. He's been on a number of times in the past. Jon Norman. Jon, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's great to be back. It must be Ashes time, right? And I love that intro as well. It's just, yeah, it just conjures up so many memories, so much angst and righteous fury, and also, you know, it's a great tune as well. So yeah, no, all good. It's great to see you, mate. Great to see you.
Yeah, so perfect time to get you on. Australia is being gripped by Ashes fever. The old enemy are coming down under this summer, and this is one of the most disliked English teams in years. Australia is seeking revenge. Baz and Stokes. I want Baz and Stokes to go home jobless after what they did to Australia in 2023. But, you know, I wanted to get you on because I want to talk to you about the English team, find out your thoughts about it. Also, if you got any questions about the Aussie team, happy to answer them for you. But are you as excited as I am? Like, a lot of Poms actually think they have a chance this summer. Are you in that boat?
Of course we've got a chance. I tell you what, we've got a bigger chance, or rather England have got a bigger chance. Excuse me. Well, there's so much to get into here, but I think England have got the best chance of winning an Ashes in Australia for 12 years. And we know what happened in 13-14. It all went disastrously wrong, 5-0 and all that. So with the benefit of hindsight, knowing now what we didn't know going into that 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th Ashes test, because that was the year that they did 10, right? Back-to-back Ashes, which was, I mean, ridiculous. But essentially, England went to Australia. And I remember listening to commentary on ABC or TMS overnight and listening to a very, very gloomy Jim Maxwell. As just like Australia, you know, had huffed and puffed a bit and did what they did for most of that series, actually. Memory serves. They were relying on Brad Haddin and another to kind of get themselves up to a score. That's and then, right. Of course, Mitchell Johnson and Ryan Harris just performed amazingly. I mean, for the ages, they will go down as Ashes legends just for that one series. But I remember listening to coverage on TMS, and Jim Maxwell was on comms, and England were 1 down, I think. Well, they must have been 1 down, yeah, because Jonathan Trott was in. Mitchell Johnson was bowling, and it was just approaching either lunch or tea, and Australia hadn't scored a huge amount of runs. And then Jonathan Trott was caught down the leg side. And up until that moment, Jim Maxwell was gloomy as. There's no chance Australia winning this Ashes. He just thought it was going to be a continuation from what we'd seen in England. And then, of course, I think I must have flicked off the radio, woke up. And from that point onwards, you know, my nightmare, you know, I thought it ended when I opened my eyes. But actually, it continued throughout the next month and a half. So it all fell away horribly. So if you take that one out, I think you've got to go back to 10-11 for England's best chance.
Well, you haven't won a test since then in our country.
Well, I was there.
Test since then. You were there.
I was there, mate. I was there for every day of that one. We could.
Too.
I'm more than happy to talk about, you know.
No, I don't want to talk about
it if you want.
No. We are not reliving that nightmare on this show.
Well,
ever,
I was also
again.
at Adelaide. I was also at Adelaide in 2006. So those two kind of even themselves out, I think. But anyway,
so you're hopeful. So you're hopeful.
Look, it's funny you should say that. You must be.
I want to ask you something though. Just framing that hope though. You're coming off another failed summer. England couldn't even beat India at home. England struggles against the big nations. They bully the small nations. So I wonder where this confidence comes from.
I saw how your team buckled in 2023. You were on the back foot. You were absolutely bricking it. I was there in Old Trafford when you retained the Ashes, as subdued as celebrations I've ever seen. You absolutely got out of one there. England should have won at Edgbaston. I mean, I won't say Lords. I'll give that to you. And then, of course, we did win 2, and we would have won at Old Trafford probably. I mean, you don't know, but certainly it was a soggy ending, it was a subdued ending. And I was at every day of that Test series, and you guys were punched in the face and you didn't know what to do. You went uber defensive. And so that told me that you guys were scared. Basically, you were scared of England. So that's why I think to myself, I would say your favorites, right? I would say if you can get Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood out on the pitch for 5 Test matches, which I'd say is quite almost impossible, but let's say you do, bolstered by Boland and of course Stark, who doesn't get expensive and a bit wayward. Even with your batting being as poor as it is, your favourites on pitches that will probably suit your style of play rather than England's. But there's a chance there, and one of the reasons there's a chance is because this England cricket team are almost impossible to read. I can see why they're so unpopular, but they go to Australia. They're going to go gung-ho. They're not going to bore you out like in 10-11, but bore you out with probably the best batting lineup they've had since 1950s. It's going to be back and forth, all action. Punches are going to be exchanged. And that's where I think a little bit of ticker is going to come into it, Who is the one that's going to take the backward step? Saying all that, England are the architects of their own downfall. And England have defeated themselves more often than not. They went to India in 2024, and that series should have been 2 apiece going to the final test. They lost 4-1. On paper, it looks like an absolute mismatch. It wasn't at all. I think they should have beaten Australia in 2023. You can argue that one, maybe. And then India this year. I mean, India impressed me greatly, actually. The more that series went on, they impressed me more and more. But, without wanting to give excuses to England, again, I think they had their series in their hands and they just kind of shot themselves in the foot. Should have won that series. They would, India had to bat a day and a half at Old Trafford, and then they had to win at the Oval. So, look, I'm not going to come on here and say England are going to win. But
that's silly.
No, and it's interesting because, I speak to people back here. A lot of Australians obviously live in England. And I've mentioned twice now the prospect because, I'm not coming down to Australia for this one. I'm going to be suffering from a bit of FOMO. And I've kind of raised the idea that, it's 2-2 going to Sydney, or England are, still in it by Melbourne, which hasn't happened for quite a while. And I've been laughed at. And I'm a bit like, I'm used to you guys being confident and all. And if you look at your record in Ashes cricket in Australia, that's understandable why you're so confident. But I've also watched you bat for the last 2 years. And I wouldn't be laughing if
that's right. That's right, because you need a solid top 3 in any test lineup. That is what I guess you call the engine room. And our top 3 is just not quite solidified. You've got Usman Khawaja, who's getting on. You've got Sam Constas, who's just come into the side. And who knows if they'll retain him. And then you've got Cameron Green at 3, but that's only recent. So, there's still a few moving parts in that top order. And, if you can get a side, if you're England and you can get any team 2 for 20, you're in the game, you're in the test. If you've got to go on with it from there. There's still Smith and Head and some great players to come, but that could absolutely help. But just going back to 2023, I do agree. I thought Cummins' captaincy was really tested in 2023. And I thought he and McDonald's tactics really were lacking in those last 3 test matches. It was very un-Australian. You're right. They were a bit spooked. They went a bit defensive, too defensive. They got too focused on sort of bouncing out the opposition and trying to sort of play fire with fire, but it wasn't working. And they did get spooked. And I just hope Cummins and McDonald have adjusted from then and have better tactics. But, I think that series was so spicy after what happened with Johnny Bairstow at Lords. I don't even think we've spoken since then. I've hardly spoken to an Englishman since then after the way they treated poor Alex Carey, the sweetest guy in world cricket and victimized by a whole country. But, after that incident, the English team wouldn't have a drink with the Aussies at the end of the series. I think there's going to be a bit of spice in this series. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. Just a quick word on the Alex Carey situation.
I could talk about it for years. I could talk about it for years.
I was listening to your intro. It features it, right? So I've never seen anything like the end of that test match, right?
Same.
So I'm up in the media center. The test comes to an end, and I don't know if I was leaving or I was heading to the pressers. I can't quite remember, but you have to walk down down this stairwell all the way down from the media center. And as I'm walking down, and you can see through the gaps into the stands on either side. And, that was a famous win for Australia. It meant you're 2-0 up in the Ashes, and as it proved, there's no way you're losing the Ashes from there. It was a Stokes had threatened to do to you what he did in 2019. So there was celebration, and when the Aussies come to town, there's thousands of Aussies in the grounds. So there was, real reason for celebration. There was relief. And, a lot of people have spent a lot of money to come all the way to the other side of the world to watch Australia play. I've done it myself. You're risking a lot. So to see Australia win at Lords must have been a bucket list moment for hundreds of Australian cricket fans. And the sight that greeted me was really, I've never seen it before or since. It was grim. Essentially, it was just pockets of people arguing. It was just, and it wasn't physical. It wasn't going to spill over like it would do at a football game, or I don't know where hooliganism is in Australia. I don't know if it happens, but it wasn't like that. I mean, essentially, it was old middle class people, but it was really, really unpleasant, and it was mean, And I kind of felt for a lot of these Aussies because they were just wanting to celebrate their team winning, and they were just getting it. Not quite as bad as Alex Carey got it from the Lords members, but they were getting it. And you can see there was kind of disappointment and confusion in their faces because they were a bit like, well, it happened yesterday, guys. And also, what? But anyway, moving on. What were we talking about? Niggle.
Just on that Lord stuff.
Niggle.
No, it's good you brought it up. So a couple of things. Firstly, I thought Baz and Stokes particularly disgraced themselves at the end of that Lord's test. For Baz to come out wagging his finger all high and mighty about the spirit of cricket just because they were 2-0 down in the Ashes, that's pretty pathetic. Stokes the same. I like Broad's honesty that he was just doing it to get under the Aussie skin. So I can kind of admire him for that. And he was upfront about it very soon after. You're right about the niggle. Those scenes at Lords that came through to the TV here, I mean, it was just jaw-dropping seeing the jeering in the Lord's Pavilion, just, unheard of scenes. And, I do think the English crowds disgraced themselves in the last Ashes. That's not to say Australian crowds are perfect, that's fine, but I do think they disgraced themselves throughout that Ashes and could do a lot better. Too much football hooliganism has come into cricket. But, I do think it underpinned a kind of cultural difference there with cricket that, at its essence, for a local English lad, if you're playing down on a Sunday and a bloke wanders out of his crease, you're probably not going to run him out. You're there for a good time, have a pint afterwards. Whereas if you're in Australia, you run that guy out and you don't think twice about it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Summarization. Yeah. I mean, moving
the niggle
from that. Yeah, and we saw the niggle again this year with India. It was almost like England had decided, and they came out and they're coming out talking this. I was like, what? They're like, oh yeah, basically they came out saying we're not going to be the nice guys anymore. And you saw a lot of back and forth between England and India And as you know, India are not a team to, shy from that kind of, verbal stuff themselves, even without the likes of Kohli. And imagine what it would have been like if Kohli had been there. So, yeah, moving on to the Ashes, without a doubt, this one is going to be absolutely in your face. And actually thinking about it, I mean, because for teams for that to really be the situation, you need two teams that are kind of equal. I mean, I know mental disintegration on behalf of the Aussies and all that for 20 years, and they were unbeaten, and they did it against anyone, even if they were going to win anyway. That's kind of been removed from the game a little bit because they're also they all play alongside each other.
And also, this Australian team is really nice. That's the thing, John. The roles are reversed. Australia's this sort of normal, fairly conservative cricket team. You've got your stodgy openers at the top. They're all nice guys, Cummins and Smith. They don't want to sledge anymore. They don't want to tell guys to F off. Whereas the English team, they're the aggressors. They're the brash team. They're not particularly bad on the field. I don't want to wag my finger, but some of the scenes towards the end of that. But the end of that fourth test against India was kind of unedifying, where they were very ungracious. So it's really a role reversal. Normally the Aussies are the bad guys, but the English are the bad guys, the villains.
I wouldn't. I know what you're saying. I thought that they were churlish at the end of that Old Trafford test. And actually, they kind of did backtrack from that, and they
got hammered here. They got hammered here.
Yeah, I of course, but that's no barometer of anything. I think they, Stokes spoke ahead of the Oval Test when, of course, he didn't play, and he as close to apologize. I wouldn't even say apologize. He is close to put his hands up, saying, yeah, in fairness, we should have given them more credit. Jadeja and Sundar. So I don't think it's going to be like that bad, and if you look at the England team, Duckett chirps away. I mean, Crawley got it and kind of gave it back. I wouldn't say he really sorted out. Root's a nice guy, Pope's a nice guy, Brooks a nice guy, Smith is as quiet as anything. It's not really like they're the most villainous bunch. You're not going to bump into them in Moss Canteen, Moss Isley Cantina, are you?
Love that reference.
But what is going to happen is the pressure of the situation is going to become so great. There's going to be so many pivotal moments when they're going to have to get nasty. Mitchell Starc is a lovely guy. Pat Cummins is a lovely guy. They're going to have to get nasty, those two. And the same for England. They're actually pretty nice. They're a nice bunch, but they're going to have to get nasty. And that's because the series itself is going to lead to those moments. I can't see an Alex Carey flashpoint. And well, you never know, right? But say something like that happens again on either side, that's when it's going to come out. But that's why we love it, right?
Well, the rivalry is as strong as ever here. I can tell you from an Australian lens, it's very, very. The temperature is very, very hot here. And last summer, India, their tour here just broke every record. Viewing, every media outlet broke records. So I think this is going to be the biggest summer in Australian cricket history. I think the viewing numbers, the attendances, all the sold out audiences, and that is just going to add to the heat. And, if England can do what India did and steal an early test match and stick in the series, because England's big problem is they come here, they're 2-0 down before they're acclimatized, and then it's too late. Well, if they can avoid that, and with Cummins coming in under an injury cloud, our top three, then it does promise for, a great series. And I can't lose either way. Either we get a very close series, which is thrilling, or Australia absolutely thrashes the Poms, which is equally as satisfying. So it's win-win for me.
Or England thrash you.
Yeah, I can't see that happening. I can see England winning, but I can't see them thrashing us.
Do you know what? I don't think that they're going to. Let me just throw this one in there, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about this series so much, and I cannot call it. I can see Australia winning 3-1, 4-1. I can see that happening. Stokes breaks down in the first test. All bets are off, right? I can see 2-2 going to Sydney. I can see that. I can see both of those two things happening. I can see a heavy, one-sided Australia win. I can see a titanic tussle for the ages. there's also something else that happens, you know, and you see this in all sport. And there is a clue back in 13-14 when a team reaches the end, it reaches the end bloody quickly. And if you look at that 13-14 team that England took to Australia, that was an all-conquering team, featuring one of the best batting lineups of all time, bolstered with, you know, plenty of options in the bowling and a gun spinner, all-round spinner, and they lost 5-0. And the team fell apart and just never played again. You know, it ended careers. It was, you know, it was the end of the cycle, right? Just saying, this Australian, how long has this Australian team got?
Well, absolutely.
Before that happens.
And I thought that the same. I thought the same thing after that first test in India, that, you know, Australia is at a danger of falling off a cliff if it gets it wrong. You know, Khawaja, Smith, a few of the fast bowlers age out very quickly. A bit like the 2015 Ashes. I mean, Australia were firm favourites, you know, or not firm, but favourites. And then, you know, by the end of the series, Clark, Watson, Haddon, you know, you name it, they'd all retired. That, I'm worried about that.
But they came into that. I remember 2015, and I remember going on air and arguing with Goffey. I went on air, and I was quite new to the job, cricket job then, so it was kind of a big deal, right? I'm going on air with Darren Goff, and I said, Shane Watson won't hit a century. He just gets to 15, gets out. He's not going to happen. And Goffey was like, "What? He'll score 2 centuries." And I said, the one player who is you can see the signs, it's Michael Clark. And Goffey was like, "What are you talking about?" You know, and that was it for Clark after that series. Haddon as well, you know, he'd been clinging on. And
that's right. Neville came in.
You see signs. You see signs of this. This may be their final hurrah, right?
Yeah.
And look, they might be here next year as well, and they beat New Zealand. That might happen.
I will say, as someone who's been watching this pretty closely, because I'm petrified of that, I do think actually the team's holding on pretty well. So Khawaja is a real question mark. I don't think he can survive against really good fast bowling. But that's the real question mark. Smith's back to his best. Our bowlers are still fit, taking wickets. So, yeah, I think we're okay. But you're right; it's a big concern, you know. And England will challenge it. Just before I let you go,
that's all right. I've got another 8 minutes. I'm going to give you a bonus 5. I'm enjoying this.
I love this, John. With you know, Brendan McCullum, you know, the one thing I think is a bit of a problem is McCullum and Stokes have put all their eggs into this basket. You know, they've been building up to this for years. They've made the regrettable mistake of every other test series saying they're preparing for the Ashes. So, you know, I wonder if they've just maybe put too much pressure on themselves. Because, you know, Brendan McCullum, all he talks about is being relaxed and playing golf and a good environment and small team. But they've put so much pressure on this one series. And the fact that they haven't beaten India, they haven't got any results, it's kind of even more pressure now that if they don't deliver here, the whole system is under question.
Well, certainly the whole Bazball era is about to be defined. You know, there's no question in my mind, at least, that 2022 and 2023 brought an interest to the game of cricket in this country like no other series since 2005. And you know what? 2023 is as close to 2005 as I've ever seen. You know, and if not for the rain at Manchester, it could have got even closer. You know, it wasn't quite of the quality. Sorry, the light goes off in this.
That's
if
all right.
You're watching on the YouTube, the when I don't move, the light goes off behind me. So essentially, I've lost my train of thought slightly. But
you were saying go on.
Yeah, so you're asking about the pressure on the team. So in terms of Bazball and what it's brought to the game, you know, it's been an unqualified success if your barometer is attracting people who aren't really interested in cricket into cricket, right? But that is going to be a mere side note if they go and stink out the Ashes, because that is how all eras are defined. And if that is the end of, and if Stokes and McCullum come back here jobless, as you say, very Nathan Lyon-esque of you, then, and that is their era over for Test cricket, it will be a disappointment, because, as you say, they didn't beat India here this year. They didn't beat India overseas. They didn't beat Australia here, and they wouldn't have beaten Australia overseas. That essentially is how you know, unless you win a World Cup, an ODI World Cup, which England, of course, have only done once, that nothing else matters. So, yeah, I mean, the pressure is absolutely on.
Is competing enough? Like if they come here and they lose 3-2, or they come back 2-2 and they haven't lost, but Australia retain the Ashes, will that be enough?
I think 2-2. Yeah,
2-2.
I
okay,
think, but I'll qualify that by saying it depends how that narrow defeat or 2-2 comes about. You know, is it because Jofra Archer gets injured and therefore they you know? I mean, we still talk about Graham Gooch going to the West Indies in 1990. You know, England won the first test. It was mentioned in Parliament. It was such a big deal. And then they should have won the third test. There was rain in Grenada or something. Then they should have won the third if Viv Richards hadn't gone on the go slow. Then Graham Gooch breaks his finger. Alan Lamb comes in as captain and England lose the last 2 tests. They lose the series 2-1, but it's a moral victory, right? If that kind of thing happens, yeah. You know, if they go 2-0 down and they come back to 2-2 and they would have won if not for the weather. Yeah. But if it's the other way round, okay, and
they're 2 up.
It's 2-2, or well, they're either 2 up and through, you know, absolute madness, they throw it away, or it's 2-2 and they go to Sydney and with weather about and for whatever game situation's going on, and they've got a chance, you know, just to play it out, or they're good, you know, or they risk everything and they lose, and it, you know, that's not going to go down particularly well, because my overriding feeling with this England team, and I've been saying this for a long time, I don't think they know when they're in the winning position. You know, Bazball, it's almost like Bazball only works when they're losing or coming up against a madly better team. You know, you don't have to play Bazball when you're winning. When you're winning, pull it back and just see it out. This England team kind of are like, we're winning now. The finishing line's over there. I know. Let's do something crazy.
Yeah, they haven't quite nailed the winning bit yet. They can scrap and win the odd test, but they haven't quite nailed capitalizing on those winning positions. You know, you go back to Edgbaston in 2023, some stupid cricket. Even this summer against India, you know, in that last test match, they had India on toast, and then some terrible shots towards the end, and you know, they threw away what would have been a famous victory. But the impression we're getting in Australia is that from 2023, the teams has developed and they're a bit smarter. Is that what you're seeing? Like they are a bit smarter?
Yeah. I'll definitely go with that, to be honest. I think they did play a lot smarter this year. I mean, I thought they played pretty smart. That's not to say they can still contrive to lose games. You know, they lost at home to Sri Lanka at the end of last season. There was a famous 1-run win against New Zealand where they enforced the follow on, right? They shouldn't have lost that game. It was 1-1 going into the final test against Pakistan, and they were in a winning position and they threw that one away. And again, they should have beaten India this summer. I mean, this is an India team, let's not forget. And England were missing, well, they missed Stokes in the last test, by the way. But this is an India team that was shorn of Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma just before the series, Ravichandran Ashwin as well. So I mean, those three. I
know.
Rishabh Pant hobbles off, right? There's no Mohammad Shami. Jasprit Bumrah can only play in 3 tests. You know, this is ridiculous.
They should win, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know. The other thing as well, just to throw it in there, is, of course, there'll be no, you know, unless something happens injury-wise, there'll be no excuses here. Jofra Archer's back, and he is bowling well. Mark Wood will be fit, and Mark Wood is one of very, you know, how many bowlers can you think of that their record in Australia against Australia is just as fearsome as it is against Australia in England? So you got Archer and Wood potentially fit and available. They've got good backups in Atkinson, Carson, Tongue. So they've got 5 bowlers ready to go. Okay. They've also got a steady batting.
So I'll tell you, Robert Craddock,
and they've got their skipper as the all-rounder. There's no excuses here.
So Robert Craddock made a very good point that England plays on a lot of flat decks, which inflates the batting averages, but it also makes it harder for your bowlers. Now, the converse is, I'm telling you, when you come to Australia, the pitches aren't as flat as they used to be, and the Kookaburra ball has been changed a little, so it's closer to the Dukes than it was before. So who knows? I think Atkinson is actually a bit of maybe a threat that we're not looking at closely enough, because I think he could do a bit of Scott Boland. If the ball's nipping around a bit on Australian conditions, I think he could be a real handful if he finds his length.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a Surrey fan, as you know, and I've seen Atkinson come through. I just think he's one of those bowlers. If all he needs to do is just get it on a length on a pit and let the ball do a bit and the pitch do the rest, I think he could be a serious problem. Also, Bryden Cast fell away a bit towards the back end of that India series, which England would have watched. And for all the Wood and Archer magic, will they both play at the same time? Probably not, unless England need to win, right? And then they'll throw them both in. So yeah, I think Atkinson can be a handful. But see, that's the other thing as well. Like when you talk about who's going to win this Ashes, I totally understand why Australia would prepare the pitches that we've seen over the last year or two. With your bowling attack, it makes complete sense in the way England go about things. But in low-scoring encounters, I'm not sure. Again, this will bring the microscope into the approaches of Crawley, Duckett, and I think Bethel at the top with Root to come in, as opposed to Constance won't play, will he? It'll be Labuschagne.
He might.
Well, Constance or Labuschagne and Khawaja and Green batting number 3. I mean, that's golden for England, by the way. They just bat so slow. I mean, you cannot hang around on those pitches.
Constance doesn't.
Well, I mean,
Marnus is back. Marnus scored a century yesterday in domestic cricket. He's back.
Marnus will be back.
They might move Green to 6, and so they might have, say, Khawaja, Constance, Labuschagne back at 3. Green goes down to 6, maybe. So there's talk about that. So
I can't see Green and Webster both playing. I just think that's one place, and neither should be batting at 3. And if Green can't bowl, then I think you've got to play. But then again, do you need the bowler if those pitches are going to be like what we expect them to be? But I watched the series in New Zealand, and I'm like, bloody hell. Australia were 89 for 4, and it was in the 42nd over. Yeah. I'm like, what? It's crazy. Okay. I mean,
you lot produced Jeff Boycott, all right? So you don't point the finger at us.
Look, the other thing in and all this is at least that approach gives your bowlers time to rest, because you can reinvent the wheel all you like. If a fast bowler has to come out and bowl fast again after bowling for 20 overs within, 4 hours or whatever, then they're going to be knackered and they're not going to be as effective in second innings. So there is certainly method within that madness. But if those pitchers are doing that, I think England's batting lineup is actually better suited because, they'll lose wickets, but they'll score quickly and they'll put pressure back on. But who bloody knows, mate? I don't know.
All right, last question, John, before I let you go. Shoaib Bashir. Baz McCullum nominated him this week as the number 1 spinner for England. He played suburban cricket in Australia a couple of years ago. I commentated on his team last year, and they said Bashir played for them last year. So he's going to come out now as England's number 1 spinner. He's going to jump 12 levels. Is he good enough?
He'll take wickets.
Okay.
And he'll go for plenty. Right. And we'll never really know. But what I will suggest is whoever wins the Ashes, and this you can clip this up and play it back to me, whoever wins the Ashes, it will be irrespective of what Shoaib Bashir does, whether he takes wickets or not. I can't see that really playing it that big. It will play a part. I'd rather have Nathan Lyon, but I think he'll take wickets and I think he'll go for runs.
Beautiful. All right, John, thank you for joining me in the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. It has been great to talk. Where can the listeners keep up with all your great work? What have you got coming out? Tell me.
Well, just subscribe to the following on podcast feed and the Talksport Cricket YouTube channel, and you will get everything. Because, of course, whilst we don't have rights for the series, we will be providing our viewers and listeners a lot of content involving some very familiar faces and names. So, check it out there. And, let's chat. Let's chat after the third test and see if anything we've just said over the last 35 minutes is actually born from
well, let's do that.
Shoaib Bashir's taken 8 for 2. And Khawaja has hit a 70-ball double century.
Oh, dear. Well, thanks for joining me, John. Tune into the following on podcast. It's great. And we'll be back.